Yo, what up, Street Talks? There, Kim. All right, so another beautiful day in paradise. Right. So, just some random thoughts. So, essentially, I have some new creative visions and aspirations for the future, which kind of reside on like making photography the new dominant artistic form of self-expression, and also realizing that all forms of art are and should be equally legitimate, and anyone who tries to talk down on you is just like a insecure nerd. So disregard the insecure nerds. And also, when we think about photography, for me, the greatest joy of photography is just being able to share your view and share your perspective with others. And contrary to what people believe, there are no more legitimate or less legitimate opinions or thoughts or beliefs. I mean, unless you're talking mathematics and physics, which is actually just true hard science. When it comes to philosophy, psychology, sociology, art, literature, and everything in between, there is actually no ultimate right or wrong. It's all just subjective and based on our own perceptions. Now, why is this important? This is important because I think a lot of us tend to get very discouraged as artists because we feel like our ideas and stuff don't have value. And my theory is modern society, the goal is to make you feel as insecure as maximally possible in order for you to become a good consumer and to actually buy your self-esteem. And how do people buy their self-esteem? We buy our self-esteem by, buying products and stuff and tools that actually make us feel more empowered and encouraged. And somewhere along the line, we lack the ability to posit our own goals, posit our own artistic loves and stuff like that. And this is, I think, where we tend to go wrong. So, essentially, as an artist, I think it's really important that we think of our camera as like the ultimate mode of creative production and creative thought and thriving, because so many of us artists, we've been brainwashed to think that photography is not a legitimate art form. And I think it's kind of stemmed from this notion that the only ultimate and true form of art is painting. So even I know so many photographers, when they first get into painting and stuff like that, photography, they're like, oh, the only reason I got into photography was I didn't know how to paint. And that's kind of a bad notion, because then you're essentially putting painting on a pedestal, and you should never put anything on a pedestal. You should only put yourself on a pedestal. No one else or anything else should be put on a pedestal. Because once you start putting others and other things on pedestals, you actually stunt your own personal growth and your own personal potential to become great. And certainly, self-greatness is the goal. The goal isn't to make other people look great or to admire other people's greatness, but it's for you to be maximally great as possible according to your personal ambitions and your abilities and so forth. Now, this is one thing I believe. No one's truly discovered the fullest extent of how awesome photography can be and how awesome photography should be. And my thought is, it's kind of like photographers are hating on themselves. Like, I look at all these, quote unquote famous photographers in the past, and this is my inner psychologist speaking to me, is that all these philosophers or these photographers in the past, they all essentially had quote unquote penis envy of other artists. Like, they had penis envy for like painters and other individuals who are able to make other forms of art, sculptures. Like, even Henri Cartier-Bresson, when I look at his photos, he photographed lots of famous painters, sculptors, Giacometti and stuff like that. And I think the whole time Cartier-Bresson's like, yo, I wish I was one of these great artists, but alas, I'm only a photographer, and therefore my artistic vision is of lesser worth. And that's why I think towards the end of his life, he gave up photography and he, went back to drawing and painting. He actually started off as a painter, and he was actually pretty good. But it looks like his blessing and his curse was, fortunately and unfortunately, his photography was actually better than any of his drawings. So this is why, even though I love the work of Henri Cartier-Bresson, I get very sus of his artistic vision, because if you have a closet photographer, painter, he's a closet painter essentially. He wanted to be a painter the whole time. And if he's the godfather of photography, then that means that none of us photographers have the self-esteem to actually proclaim ourselves as great photographers, but just, and we're all, in one way or another, we're all kind of descendants of Henri Cartier-Bresson. He was the ultimate platonic artist who kind of, in some ways, created photography for us, but also ruined photography for us. I would actually say a much more lighthearted fellow, better photographer is probably Robert Capa. He was much more handsome, sexy, interesting, courageous, and he was actually kind of a lot more lighthearted and spirited. He was kind of he was probably the ultimate companion to Henri Cartier-Bresson, in my opinion. And it's just very tragic that he died at such a young age, because I don't know, I think if Robert Capa was around for longer, he would actually helped keep Henri Cartier-Bresson motivated and stuff like that. So I don't want to psychoanalyze too much on Henri Cartier-Bresson's mentality, but I think it is interesting insofar much as think about his psychology will help better us understand our psychology and understanding why we make photos and for what we make photos and stuff like that. Because I'm starting to realize, we could talk about photographic technique for the rest of our lives, but until we could really understand the psychology behind photography, we were not going to be able to make as epic strides and bounds as we can in photography. And this is really the ultimate goal, is for us to dispel silly myths and untruths in photography. And that's what I'm going to be personally trying to become a hero for photography, where I could better analyze, dissect kind of petty notions of anti-photo and art from Henri Cartier-Bresson and so forth, in order to help us, empower us all as photographers. Because once again, photographers are artists, photographers are as legitimate as painters, and who knows, maybe one day we could become more legitimate than painters.